A feral child is a child that has been brought up from a very young age without any human contact, and they are usually abused or abandoned before they get a chance to develop the basic human traits that we all have. Now, feral children have been documented for centuries, and the effects this lack of human contact has on a child has always fascinated yet baffled psychologists. But despite feral upbringings being so widely studied, there is another form that is just as interesting, and that's when a child is raised by animals and learns to hunt, eat, and be just like their new animal family. Now, we've all seen The Jungle Book and Mowgli's incredible time with his new animal friends, but the reality of being raised by animals can be much different, and although those involved may not necessarily be depressed or upset in the moment because they know no different, when they're attempted to be brought back into human civilization, there is more often than not some serious psychological problems. Here are 5 cases of children being raised by animals and the outcomes such a thing can have on their physical and mental state. Kamula and Amula. The story of Kamula and Amula has attracted a lot of debate and attention since first being reported, and is one of the oldest cases in this list. It started in 1920 when Indian clergyman Joseph Amritlo Lasing claims he discovered 2 human-like creatures living with a wolf family in a den that had been carved into an abandoned termite hill in Bengal, India. Singh believed that they were human as they looked much different to the wolves, so he captured them and took them to the nearby orphanage he ran. It was there where he discovered they were in fact 2 human girls, Kamula being aged around 8 years old and Amula was about 18 months. He and his wife looked after them, and in his diary, Singh described that their behaviour and appearance was wolfish. They were ferocious and walked on all fours, which had resulted in hard calluses on their hands and knees, and even ate in a crouched position, licking liquids like a dog and preferring raw meat. They were also nocturnal and howled through the night, calling for their lost wolf family that they had been taken from. All attempts to humanize them failed, and they refused to speak or wear clothing. Sadly, just a few months after being separated from the wolves, Amula died of a kidney infection possibly caused by worms, and Kamula became ill but survived. Singh claimed the girls seemed to show no human emotion, but after Amula had passed, Kamula was clearly heartbroken and showed significant signs of grief in the months after. Now alone and unable to relate her animal behaviour to her sister, Kamula was comforted even more by Singh's wife and slowly began to learn some human mannerism. She would mostly stand upright to move around, and she started to develop a small vocabulary, as well as recognise colours and others around her. By now, the world was aware of Kamula, and she was invited by the Psychological Society of New York to make her first public appearance. The invitation was declined as her health was deteriorating, and on the 14th of November 1929, she died after contracting tuberculosis. After researching Mr. Singh's diary of the events, it's believed the pair must have been abandoned when Amula was born, and since she was around 18 months when they were found, they must have been living with the wolves for that period. Why they were left is unclear, but psychologists have come up with a theory that the 2 girls could have been autistic with congenital defects. Whether this was the reason they were abandoned, or whether they both developed this from growing up with the animals is unsure, but it just goes to show the psychological and cognitive effects being raised by animals can have on humans. Cambodian Jungle Girl. On January the 13th, 2007, a young woman who had been spotted previously stealing food by locals emerged from the jungle of Ratakhaniri province in a remote part of Cambodia. She was completely naked, filthy and scared, and had obviously been sleeping rough for a while. A nearby family came forward and claimed she was their missing daughter who had disappeared in 1988 with her 6-year-old sister when she was just 8 years old, which if true would make this girl 27 years old, meaning she had spent 19 years of her life in the jungle. They said her name was Rochom Ing and looked after her, but she found it hard to adjust to civilized life, and despite around-the-clock care from them, she would often escape and head back to the jungle. Much like when prisoners who spend long periods of time in jail and find it almost impossible to adjust to normal life, this was the same psychological effect Rochom was having. Jungle was her home. Whilst in the company of her new family, she would resist wearing clothes and could only speak 3 words: father, mother and stomach ache. She would prefer to crawl around on all fours rather than walk, and to indicate she was hungry or thirsty, she would point to her mouth. For several years, Rochom had great difficulty adjusting. She was depressed during the day and restless at night, and was admitted to hospital on several occasions. In May 2010, she again escaped to the jungle and was missing for over a month until she was finally found in a 10-meter deep toilet, standing up to her chest in human excrement. As far as we are aware, Rochom is still living with her family and has regular visits from a psychologist, but she still prefers to live outside of the family home in a small chicken coop and cannot speak a language. The condition of Rochom indicated that she had lived in the jungle most of her life, but it's not sure if she was raised by animals or lived in solitude. but judging by the way she crawled around on all fours and acted like an animal suggests she was definitely at least in the company of them. To add a little more uncertainty to this case, the family who claims she was their daughter, and who she is still living with, refused to have a DNA test, so we may never know if they really are her family, or if her age and subsequently time in the jungle is correct. The Wolf Boy of Moscow. In 2007, villagers living near a remote forest in the Kaluga region of central Russia found what they called a wild male creature living in a lair made of sticks and leaves deep in the forest. The temperature at the time of the discovery was freezing, so concerned villagers reported the find to the police. They went in and rescued the boy, took him to a clinic in Moscow and named him Lyuka. A police spokesman described the boy as looking around 10 years old, although it was believed he was much older than he looked. At the clinic, he was given clothes and a wash, which he forcefully refused, and his claw-like toenails were cut down. Lyuka appeared to be intelligent but did not speak Russian or any other language. He instead growled like a dog, and it was suspected that he had been living in the wild for many years, most likely with a pack of wolves, and although he did not move around on all fours like them, he walked with half-bent legs. It was concluded that the boy was a danger to others, and despite his size, he was incredibly strong and aggressive, and had very sharp teeth that could inflict serious damage if he bit someone. This didn't happen, however, as just 24 hours after being sent to the clinic, Lyuka escaped and has never been seen again. Many experts think that it's unlikely he is still alive, as after some tests were carried out in the clinic, it was thought he had severe psychological problems and carried several viruses and infections. But until he is sighted or his body is found, as far as we know, the Wolf Boy of Moscow is still living wild once again. Oksana Malaya. Oksana was born in Ukraine on November 4, 1983, and showed no signs of any abnormalities. She was taken home from hospital by her parents, who unfortunately were chronic alcoholics and showed her no care as they wanted a boy instead. By age 3, Oksana was severely neglected and had not learnt the basic skills most have at that age. At this stage, she had been left outside to care for herself and instinctively looked for shelter and warmth. This is when she crawled into the family farm kennel and curled up with the mongrel dogs that lived there. Rejected by her human parents, Oksana was adopted by the human dogs and lived with them for 6 years, eating raw meat, barking, and walking on all fours just like they did. They showed her love, attention, and care, something she had not received from her parents, and if it wasn't for a concerned neighbour who reported her living conditions to the police, she would have continued living with them for much longer. When police turned up to investigate, the now 8-year-old Oksana ran at them barking and growling before she was taken away. She could not talk properly and lacked many basic human traits. She would run around on all fours, eat food off the floor, and cleaned herself like a dog. Here is a video of her shortly after she was rescued that shows how being brought up without human contact and nothing but animals can massively change the behavioural traits of a child. After this, she received intensive specialized therapy and education, and although she will remain intellectually impaired, she can now speak fluently and has a job at the hospital farm where she lives. Oksana's case is one of the only raised by animal stories out there with video footage of the effects it can have, and it really throws fuel on the fire to the age-old psychological debate of nature versus nurture, and whether or not a human's personality, talents, and development are majorly affected by life experiences and the environment from a young age, and not necessarily natural-born intuition. The Ugandan Monkey Boy. John Sabunya was born in Uganda in 1988, and at the age of just 2 years, he witnessed his father murdering his mother. Terrified he would be next, John fled into the Ugandan jungle, where he remained for 3 years. Whilst there, a bunch of vervet monkeys offered him roots, nuts, and fruit, and then taught him how to search for food and climb trees. During this time, the area was in the middle of a civil war, so very few humans ventured into the jungle. But when a lady was searching for firewood, she came across a pack of monkeys and noticed that one of them looked different. She ran back to her village and informed the people, who then went out to investigate. On closer inspection, they realised it wasn't a monkey, but a 5-year-old boy. He was eventually rescued, but he and the monkeys put up a fight and were throwing sticks and stones at the villagers. When he was taken back, he was nursed by the locals, but not without complications. Feeding him hot food made him ill, and apparently a 4-foot-long intestinal worm was removed from him. The villagers believe he wouldn't have lived long if he hadn't been rescued. He needed special care, so was taken in by orphanage owners Paul and Molly, and despite only spending 3 years with the monkeys, he displayed many of their traits, like not making eye contact and greeting people from the side rather than face first. Paul and Molly slowly rehabilitated him, but even after 10 years, John was still pulling his gums back when he smiled, and had a strange, lopsided walk. Today, John is living a normal and prosperous life and has no serious psychological problems following his upbringing. He has moved on and has even gone on to become part of the Pearl of Africa Choir, which he has done many tours with. But he will never forget that if not for the Vivid Monkeys of Uganda, who he said cared and loved him as if he was one of their own, he would have no doubt died in the jungle a long time ago. So there's 5 cases of feral children being raised by animals. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the Top 5's website mailing list to keep up to date with the awesome articles I publish there every Monday, Wednesday and Saturday. And I also have some major plans for that website that I'm going to be releasing soon that I know you're all going to enjoy. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next week for another video.